All right, we want to get started. Okay, thank you all for coming out. This is a study. I'm Chuck Proctor. I'm the Culpeper District VDOT planning manager, and I'm the project manager for this study. We're going to be presenting some alternative solutions for the various intersections along the 29 corridor from Airport Road in Albemarle County through Matthew Mills in Greene County. And I'd like to turn it over to the consultants team from Kittleson, Andy and Kylie, and they're going to be presenting on the various alternatives.
Thanks, Chuck, and thanks everyone for coming out tonight. I know it's a little late in the evening for folks to be joining us, so appreciate you spending your time with us. And I also want to welcome our stakeholders for the study. Obviously, Chuck already mentioned this is a VDOT study, so welcome to Chuck. We also have with us members from Albemarle County and Greene County, the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, the TJPDC, as well as CAT and joint local transit operators who are joining us, and they are also stakeholders in the study who've been providing input throughout. So appreciate all their input so far and appreciate them joining us tonight. So tonight, you already heard from Chuck Proctor, who's the district planning manager for VDOT in the Culpeper District. I'm Andy Butzik. I'm a senior engineer with Kittleson Associates in our Reston office. And we also have Kylie Cavanis, who's an engineering associate with us in our Reston office as well. So what we're looking to get out of tonight is, first of all, to share why this study is happening and give you a little bit of background about what we've learned so far after analyzing the existing conditions along the corridor and the future no-build conditions. So we're going to be primarily sharing some of the preliminary alternatives that we've developed to take a look at some improvements along the corridor and discuss next steps. But most importantly, on this meeting, we're hoping to get your input as well, and that's the main purpose of tonight, is to share them with you, get your feedback, and answer any questions that we can for you tonight. So if you haven't used Zoom before, you can chat questions at us using the Q&A button down the bottom. Feel free at any point in time during the presentation to ask a question. You can either type it in there and we'll try and answer it in real time if we can via the chat, or if it's a little more complicated or needs a little bit more of an explanation, we'll be happy to answer it at a Q&A session at the end of the meeting. There'll also be the opportunity, if you aren't able to use that Q&A, we can unmute you and you can ask that question via the telephone or your microphone. So a little bit about why the study is happening. So first of all, in case you're not familiar, the study area is about approximately a 6-mile corridor on the US 29, running from Greene County into Albemarle County. It runs from Deerfield Drive and Matthews Mill Road up at the north, down to Airport Road down on the south. This is an important corridor because it serves both local and regional traffic in this area. So with all the planned growth and population growth in the area, looking at this corridor long term, it plays an important role in both that regional and local traffic. So a little bit about the purpose of the study, and this study is driven by all modes of transportation, and we want to assess the future travel projections and development patterns so that we can plan for the future. And the future that we're planning, the future year we're planning for in this study is 2045. And in many cases, evaluating those future conditions, we've identified some deficiencies or areas where we think that some improvements could be implemented, some of them sooner rather than later. So we've been working diligently over the last few months to generate some alternatives at various locations to address some of those shortcomings through the lens of our study goals, which we'll talk about next. Okay. So the vision that the stakeholder group came up for this corridor is to develop a corridor that provides safe travel and adequate capacity for all uses and users of the roadway. And we feel that we can accomplish those goals, that vision, by 5 goals down below, which are improving safety, managing congestion, increasing multimodal usability and accessibility, supporting economic development, and supporting future growth. So we've worked as a stakeholder group to develop these goals, and we've reached out to you all, the public, in our last public meeting as well as the last public survey to help us prioritize those goals based on your experiences. So where we are in this process, Right now, we're refining the alternatives that we developed and really taking this opportunity to get your feedback on some of the initial alternatives. And that feedback will come through the question and answer session, as well as an online survey that we'll talk a little bit more about. But after this meeting, we're going to take your feedback, refine some of the alternatives, and document them in the final report.
All right.
Yep, sorry, I'll pass it over to Kylie to talk about a little bit what we've learned so far.
No worries. Thanks, Andy. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kylie Cavanis, and I am from Kittleson and Associates, an engineering associate and project manager on Kittleson's end for this study. These next slides are going to summarize what has been learned from the study so far and are primarily a recap of the information shared at the first public meeting back in September 2021, along with some feedback received from you all in the associated survey last September. If you would like to access the materials from that meeting, we do have a VDOT project website that's currently being updated for this study. We can go ahead and include the link in the chat, but just note that it's a little outdated from the last public meeting. And it's using this webpage that you'll also be able to access our new survey for after the public meeting tonight. So starting with existing conditions and bike ped facilities. Throughout the extent of the study area, there is a lack of facilities like trails, shared use paths, and crossings, with only 2 intersections incorporating any sort of non-motorized facility. By nature, though, US 29 is a major arterial, which tends to go traditionally hand in hand with heavy vehicular traffic, while other modes of transportation are much less supported. With that said, we received useful feedback from the survey last fall about biking and walking along or around the study area. Themes centered around the dangerous existing conditions today, the high speeds, and the need for physical separation for non-motorized facilities away from cars. Participants that indicated a desire to walk and/or bike also noted investments like off-street trails and shared use paths and wide buffers or landscaping away from vehicular lanes. Similarly, there is a lack of existing transit facilities and stops on the corridor. 2 transit services do run in the vicinity of the study area, Charlottesville Area Transit, otherwise known as CAT, and Jaunt. Both of those are stakeholders with us for this study. And Jaunt runs a connect line for commuters into Charlottesville. Its closest transit stop is about 900 feet south of Airport Road, which is technically out of our study area. And CAT's closest stop is actually 3 miles south of Airport Road, again, getting closer to Charlottesville. But similar to the bike ped facilities, feedback from the survey showed that there is a desire for transit facilities throughout the study area. Specifically, themes revolved around transit opportunities to hospitals, down to Charlottesville, other retail areas closer to the city, as well as transit being increasingly helpful for the aging population up north. Now, shifting a little bit into crashes along the corridor, we pulled crash data from 2015 to 2020 to get a sense of existing safety conditions. There were 798 crashes between those years, with 33% reporting injuries or fatalities. The 3 fatal crashes all involved pedestrians between Deerfield Drive and Heatherton Drive on the north side of our study area. Rear end crashes are the most common type pulled from this data at 61%, followed by angle crashes and off-road fixed object crashes. Most occurred at intersections, though there was a significant amount as well that occur along the segment. So now for traffic operations, level of service, otherwise called LOS, is a metric that we use to determine the quality of an intersection. It's based on a scale of A through F, where A is ideal free flow conditions, and F is poor, significantly delayed conditions. In urban conditions, we aim for level service D or better. There is more of an operations concern during the morning rush hour, which makes sense given the heavy southbound traffic through down to Charlottesville, which are likely commuters. In addition to the LOS results, 2 intersections operate over capacity, meaning that the volume of the intersection exceeds what is actually able to be processed. And those intersections are US 29 at Frays Mill Road and at Airport Road. Looking at existing conditions in the PM, we see a less strained corridor with overall less capacity and level service issues. Still, there are 2 intersections operating worse than LOSD, and Airport Road is over capacity. There are some planned improvements along US 29 that are moving forward in the study corridor before we look at future conditions. The largest roadway improvement is the Route 670-607 connector, which is anticipated to be a 2-lane road connecting Route 670 and 607 to US 29 by 2025. 3 new signals are also planned and tied to site development, Heatherton Drive up north, and then the eastern access and northern U-turn at the North Side Drive R-cut, which has recently been put in. And in our no-build conditions, we assume a future year of 2045, like Andy said, and we analyze the corridor assuming these improvements on the slide are in place. In the future no-build traffic conditions, a growth rate was applied to volumes based on the statewide planning system, historic growth graphs. We see the AM has a number of intersections operating at level service E and level service F, and 5 intersections are over capacity, which is 3 more than what we saw in existing conditions. In the PM future no build conditions, we see more intersections operating at LOS E and F as well than under existing conditions. 6 intersections are over capacity as opposed to only 1, which was Airport Road in the existing conditions. So this is a little bit of a synopsis on what we've looked at, crashes, facilities, and operational conditions for our study so far. And as I stated about the comments earlier, that the quotes that I was pulling, we did release a survey in tandem with the public meeting last September. And we asked for your input related to the project study goals and your priorities. What problems do you face? What opportunities do you imagine for the corridor? Allowing us to gather qualitative and quantitative data from you all. And we received over 370 responses to the survey. So thank you. We also asked you what transportation issues and what opportunities people see for US 29. Participants could select more than one answer for all of the questions that we had provided, but what we found is that 92% of participants did vote that they have observed congestion and queuing, along with 63% reporting speeding and nearly 40% reporting lack of pedestrian and bicycle crossings. When we asked what investments would improve the driving experience, we found that 80% of respondents chose reduced congestion and queuing. We also found that 57% voted for intersection improvements and 42% voted for reduced turning conflicts. So these are a couple of comments that I've included from our survey last time around. But now I'll pass it back over to Andy to start discussing preliminary alternatives.
Yeah, thanks, Callie. Yeah, so Callie had highlighted some of the existing challenges along the corridor and some more challenges that are coming in 2045 if nothing is done along the corridor. So we took a look at those challenges and developed a list of preliminary alternatives that we think might help address some of those challenges and achieve some of the study goals that we have. But before we dive into those alternatives, just wanted to highlight the process a little bit. So at the high level, we evaluated each of the study intersections and identified their challenges. So taking those study intersections, we screened the whole corridor for what we call low-cost improvements, and those are sort of short-term improvements that can be implemented pretty readily along the corridor, and those include things like adjusting signal timing, adjusting the phasing of the signals, adding a turn lane on a particular approach of a signal to help add capacity, something that doesn't require a wholesale redo of the entire intersection. So taking a look at those options first to see if there's any, whether they're short-term or long-term solutions that are low cost. But there are certain instances where those don't fully address some of the issues that we're seeing, particularly the operational and safety issues at some of these intersections. So at the next level, we screened all of the intersections using VJust, which is the Virginia Junction Screening Tool. And that allows us to take a more holistic look at the intersection control form. So we screened for over 20 at-grade innovative intersections at each of these intersections. So it's looking beyond just a stop sign or a traditional traffic signal, some more innovative intersections that can help provide better operations and safety performance at these intersections. So after screening for both those low cost and some of those more innovative intersections, we did a detailed operational analysis of all the alternatives that showed promise and evaluated them for feasibility long term. And that ultimately led to our preliminary list of alternatives that we've developed and we're about to present to you. So all of these alternatives have been vetted operationally to show that they work and screened for safety and multimodal improvements. So we think all of these are viable options, but before we jump in, I just want to put a disclaimer that all of these are at the planning stage. None of these are funded or scheduled, so these are just ideas and solutions we think may help when we get to the 2045 conditions. So what we're really looking for is we're looking for your feedback on these initial alternatives. And ultimately, at the end of this project, if these specific alternatives are pursued further by VDOT, the counties, each of these would be developed independently. Not all of these things would come in all at once along the corridor. They'd be, maybe 6 years down the line, one of them come in and another one, further down the line. And realistically, some of them may never come online due to funding issues. So just keep that in mind as we're walking through. It may seem like a lot of different projects, but they'd be coming online independent of each other. And some of the funding mechanisms that may be implemented or explored further down the line, some of these could be funded by private development as they add traffic to the network to mitigate some of their impacts. Some of these may come through VDOT funds in the Smart Scale program, which we'll highlight in a little bit, or they could come through county funds, as well as a whole host of other ways that these could get funded, which puts them on different sort of timelines. So jumping in, we'll start at a high level. As Kylie mentioned earlier, there's not many pedestrian and bicycle facilities out there today, and there is a large proponent of the population that's interested in walking or biking, but don't feel safe doing so, so they drive a single occupant vehicle today. So one of the corridor-wide alternatives we're looking to implement is a shared use path along the west side of US 29. That would be a 10-foot wide shared use path with pedestrian crossings added at every intersection. For all intersections, there'd be a crossing on the west side to cross the side street, and at signalized intersections, providing a signalized pedestrian crossing along the north leg, so pedestrians and bikes can safely cross US 29. If you cross at one of the unsignalized intersections, a little bit unsafe, just because it's a little bit harder to control those vehicular speeds. But I think that will go a long way to starting to help improve pedestrian and bike operations, and hopefully in the future lead to the ability for transit along the corridor. Because right now, if you were to just sort of add stops along the corridor directly, not many places for pedestrians and bikes to safely access the adjacent land uses from there. And before we get into some of the individual alternatives at the intersections, I want to provide a high-level overview of some of the innovative intersections that came out of that VJust analysis, like I mentioned earlier, that screened for over 20 at-grade intersections types. So I'm not going to present all 20. I think there's only a handful that we think makes sense along this corridor. The first one is a restricted crossing U-turn, or the R-cut for short. And what this intersection does, if you look at the graphic on the right, if you would imagine US 29 was running horizontal along the page and one of the side streets was north-south on the page, this redirects left turns and through movements from the minor streets to make a right turn at the main intersection. So you highlighting that purple or maroon line there. So they make a right turn at the main intersection instead of making a left, and then travel downstream, make a U-turn at a new median opening. And then after making that U-turn, either make a right turn to complete their through movement or continue through southbound or whichever direction on US 29, so to complete their left turn movement. And the benefits of doing this are listed on the screen, and there's quite a few. And probably the most important is the improvement to safety. And the way it does this is it reduces the number of conflict points. And conflict points is something you'll hear me mention a few times. And it's essentially a conflict point is any time that a vehicle has the potential to cross path with another vehicle. So if you reduce those number of paths that vehicles could potentially cross that intersection, you're inherently going to reduce the risk for a crash, because vehicles need to cross paths to hit one another. So at this intersection, you've redirected those left turns, you've shifted them away from the main intersection. So that reduces the risk for those high severity angle crashes, left turn or T-bone crashes that you might experience, which tend to be higher severity due to the angle that the vehicles crash at. So by redirecting vehicles to enter US 29 at an angle, it can reduce that severity and the potential for that crash. And implementing an R-cut also increases the efficiency and reduces delay at the intersection. So at a traditional traffic signal, there are 8 signal phases. You can imagine on US 29, there's the left turn phases, there's the through and right phases, and then you get to the minor street, you might have left turn phases for the individual side streets, and then the through and right phases for the side streets. What this does is it removes that left turn phase from the signal, so it reduces that time waiting for all the other movements, and it gives that green time back to all the other movements of the intersection. So it reduces delay for all movements. And you can see with that purple line, it may look like it was a little bit out of direction travel, but overall, where we're recommending this improvement, it really does reduce travel times for that minor street left turn, just because the signal is operating so much more efficiently with fewer phases. And another important thing is that this is a more cost-effective solution than adding lanes to add capacity to US 29. If a traditional signal only has so much capacity, so at a certain point you just have to start adding lanes, and that goes against some of the other goals of creating a more pedestrian and multimodal environment. So this is, I think, is a good alternative in certain locations. And we'll be happy to answer any questions as this. Kylie's going to highlight some specific instances with more context at specific intersections, but we'd encourage you to check out the website at the bottom. VDOT has a great website that highlights all these innovative intersections. They have great videos and graphics depicting the benefits. Sai is going to put that link in the chat so you can take a look at your own leisure. But again, we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have on any of these at the end. So the next innovative intersection form we think makes sense at a few locations is the Bowtie Intersection. And what this does is it redirects left turns from all movements at the intersection, and it redirects them to utilize roundabouts on the side streets. So if you were to imagine on this graphic, US 29 is running north-south on the page and the minor streets are running horizontally. Roundabouts would be installed on the minor streets. And if you were trying to make a left turn from US 29, you would, instead of making a direct left at the main signal, you would take a right turn following that yellow line, make a U-turn at the roundabout, and then travel through the intersection. Similarly, if you were making a minor street left turn, if you follow the orange-purple line, you, instead of traveling directly left, you travel straight through the intersection, make a U-turn at the roundabout, and then make a right turn at the main signal. And the benefits of doing this are similar to the R-cut. I mean, a little bit different in terms of how those movements are served, but it redirects those left turns and eliminates that left turn phasing at the main signal. So again, it's reducing those conflict points and reducing the potential for those high severity angle crashes, T-bone crashes at the intersection. It improves operations because, again, you're removing signal phases. You're making it more efficient for all movements. So all movements are going to see a benefit in terms of travel time at the intersection, even though there's a little bit of out of direction travel for left turns. It still overall is expected to operate more efficiently for most movements in terms of travel times. And again, similar to the ARCUT, there is an upfront capital cost to developing something like the roundabouts on the minor streets, but it is more cost effective ultimately than widening all of US 29 to add more capacity at a traditional signal. And then the last one that we're going to highlight tonight is a quadrant roadway. So what this option does is it redirects left turns for all movement at the main intersection and shifts them over to a connector roadway, which you see up in the upper right. And this new roadway, adjacent roadway, serves those left turns, and you see a lot of the same benefits we talked about with the Bowtie and the ARCUT at the main intersection, where eliminating those left turns helps improve safety by reducing the number of conflict points and the potential for angle crashes. It increases efficiency because you remove those additional signal phases and provided more green time to all the other movements. But the one major downside to this is cost. So we're not going to, adding a new roadway, that connector roadway isn't a cheap cost. So you won't see us recommend this anywhere where there isn't already a connector road planned or already in place, because that can be pretty cost prohibitive to design and add a new roadway to accommodate this. So most of the places where we're implementing this there's already that connector, that natural connection in place. So again, feel free to ask any questions at the end. We're happy to answer those about any of these alternatives. And feel free to check out the website that Sai put in the chat. But now I'll turn it back to Kylie to walk through some of the individual intersection improvements.
Cool. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, just reiterating here, these concepts are very much in the planning stage, no funding or schedule in place. We want to hear your thoughts and provide feedback on these potential ideas. So let's jump in. First, we have the intersection of US 29 at Matthew Mill Road. And this intersection is along a segment that VDOT has noted as a potential safety improvement location. It also has both safety and operational concerns. And so we have 4 alternatives that are at this intersection. So this alternative is the modified signal and some adjustments to lane configurations. And this modifies the existing signal to convert the minor leg, which is Cedar Grove, Matthew Mill Road, from split phasing to protective permissive phasing. So instead of Cedar Grove Road all going at once and then everyone from Matthew Mill going at once, it would be a concurrent phase. And so additionally, a separate left through and right lane are provided on the eastbound approach, which you'll see here. The benefits to this improvement include reduced travel time. There's no need to redirect travel. Everyone is going in the direction that they are headed, and unlike an ARCUT or a Bowtie, there's no rerouting needed. There's also added pedestrian crossings signalized. So on your western and northern side of the intersection, like we had specified in the proposed multimodal improvements. The challenge here is there's some right-of-way acquisition that would be needed for the additional lanes. And I will say, while we move through these, they might seem a little fast. Once we get through them all, we'll talk about next steps, and there will be an opportunity for you to take a look at them in more detail and depth and provide us that feedback instead of me spending 30 seconds on on each alternative here. So this alternative at Matthew Mill is the ARCUT. This alternative converts the intersection to direct all of that minor approach vehicles from Matthew Mill and Cedar Grove Road to make a U-turn at neighboring intersections. So in this case, It's the unsignalized Deerfield Drive intersection and the signalized Route 670-607 connector that we're expecting to be in place in the future year. And so this alternative aligns with that project as well as the site development projects that are going on as well in this area. The benefits to this improvement include reduced travel time and the addition of pedestrian signals. It's similar to the last one. In this case, the bike lane on Matthew Mill is also transitioned into using those crossing facilities. And the risk of angle crashes is reduced, as Andy said, because the left turns are redirected. And redirecting trips helps to remove those conflict points. Here, there's a minor out of direction travel as a result of that for those coming to or from Matthew Mill and Cedar Grove. Lefts are still able to be made as normal on the main line. And then the other challenges with this is that with any other project, construction costs are going to be a little higher than say just a singular intersection like signal modification or adding a lane. Some right-of-way will need to be acquired as well. All right, so next we have the bow tie at Matthew Mill Road. This alternative converts the intersection to have the bow tie, as we call it, the two roundabouts on each side of the minor street to redirect those left turns at the intersection. The benefits to this improvement include, again, that reduced travel time, the risk of angle crashes because of the redirected left turns. In this case, we actually have a wider pedestrian median refuge between the crossings because we are essentially getting rid of the left turn lane on US 29 and is instead making green space and adding to the median for that. So shorter crossing distances than the traditional the intersection there today. And the challenges include, again, the higher construction costs and more right-of-way acquisition. All right, last for Matthew Mill Road, we have the partial quadrant roadway. As Andy said, the partial quadrant or the quadrant roadway is not always the best alternative from a cost standpoint and a right-of-way acquisition standpoint. Conveniently at this location, we, with the Route 607, 670 connector being in place, it can serve as said quadrant roadway. And so the partial quadrant roadway will redirect all of the minor leg left turns and still allow the major, so US 29 lefts to occur. It would just be the minor streets that would be rerouted, and vehicles in this case will access US 29 using the proposed Route 670, 607 connector. And the benefits of this improvement include, again, reduced travel time, risk of angle crashes, fewer conflict points, and the addition of pedestrian signals with shorter crossing distances. The challenges include higher construction costs and minor right-of-way acquisition. In addition, there is out-of-direction travel along with moderately increased travel times for those left turns coming out of Matthew Mill and Cedar Grove Road. So the left turns that you would be making onto US 29, instead of making the, well, we're looking, this is the westbound left here onto southbound US 29. Instead, it would require using Pretty Creek Road up to the connector. And actually, in this case, given the improvements that are planned at Heatherton Drive and the Route 670 connector, would be kind of like an R-cut movement. So you do get an increase of travel time for that, but significantly improves the intersection itself at Matthew Mill and US 29. All right, so jumping south a little bit, we have the intersection of US 29 and Frays Mill Road. Today, this intersection is identified by VDOT as a potential safety improvement location, has significant operational concerns. We had 3 alternatives for this intersection to share with you today. The first one is another modified signal lane configuration adjustment. This alternative adds a separate right turn lane at Frays Mill Road and Burnley Station approaches. And then the right turn overlaps are a phase that can be added to the signal to minimize queues and keep those right turns flowing, maybe when the left and the through movements are not going as well. Still remaining split phase like it is today. The benefits to this improvement include the reduced travel time, and it's relatively low cost compared to the other alternatives. I also didn't mention before, but we also have our north and western pedestrian crossings. The challenges here include right-of-way acquisition. So the next alternative that we looked at is the R-cut at Frays Mill Road. This alternative, again, directs the minor approaches, so Burnley Station and Frays Mill, to make a right turn, then make a U-turn at the proposed signalized medium brakes that would be in place. And so the benefits to this improvement include reduced travel time for all of the approaches, the addition of pedestrian signals that actually will allow, it's a little bit more broken up, so shorter crossing distances. And then the risk of angle crashes being reduced due to those fewer conflict points. The challenges are that it is more costly. Some of the right-of-way will need to be acquired. And then there is some minor out-of-direction travel needed for those redirected lefts. All right, and lastly, for Frays Mill Road, we have the Bowtie. This alternative converts the intersection to have 2 roundabouts on the minor legs. So this redirects the left turns at the intersection, both the major and the minor legs. Similar to what I had shown with Matthew Mill, the benefits to this include, the reduced travel time, the risk of angle crashes because of the elimination of those conflict points, and then the addition the addition to the medians that allow for pedestrian refuges to be longer and the crossing distances to be shorter. The challenges include, for this one, higher construction costs again, but also pretty substantial right-of-way acquisition. So something to note, there's some topography challenges out here, and then something like an R-cut that might add a lane or a little bubble or a bulb out is much less than, say, a roundabout being added where there currently isn't an intersection today. We do have the Frays Mill approach being lined up with, I believe this is Dickerson Road, but I might have to double check on that. But this is at an existing intersection today. So now moving further south down to Boulders Road and Briarwood Drive, we have this intersection that has significant operational concerns. It's identified by VDOT as a priority intersection, and along the segment, it is along a segment that is noted for potential safety improvements. We have 2 alternatives for this intersection, one being the modified signal and lane configurations, which converts the minor leg from split phasing. So again, one minor leg goes, all of the lanes, and then the other one goes, to, again, permissive through right phasing and protected left phasing. And so the benefits to this improvement is reduced travel time, a little bit more efficiency in the signal, which reduces delays, and then added pedestrian facilities as well. The challenge includes right-of-way acquisition and the short-term operational improvement. I'd say for the cost and effort spent for this one. And then we have an R-cut, which converts the intersection to direct the Boulders and Briarwood to make that right turn and make the U-turn at the proposed median breaks. So again, reduced travel time, the addition of pedestrian signals, and most importantly, I think comparing the two alternatives, you're reducing that risk of angle crashes by removing those conflict points. The challenges to an R-cut compared to any signalized modification is that it's more costly. Some right-of-way is going to need to be acquired, and then some minor out of direction travel is needed for those trying to make a left or a through on Boulders or Briarwood Drive. Okay, next we have the intersection of US 29 and Camelot Drive. And today this intersection is along a segment identified as a potential safety improvement and has operational concerns. Today it's unsignalized, and we have one alternative for this intersection, which is in sense what we call a limited access modification. It's sort of like a light R-cut, I would consider it. It limits the access by converting the intersection to restrict those left and throughs. The difference here is Camelot Drive is actually connected further north with Briarwood Drive. And so the challenges with this one are that it would require some out of direction travel, but those that would need to turn left, say from Camelot to turn left and go northbound on US 29, would be able to access US 29 further north at Briarwood Drive and that signal or R-cut. The left turns would be pocketed in like this, so that we have sort of an island over here is what we've been calling it, but very little access for this driveway. So again, the using Briarwood Drive and Camelot Drive to make movements up and down US 29 is the plan here. And then the benefits again include the risk of angle crashes being reduced and improving access management. And we also have our pedestrian crossing on the western side for the unsignalized intersection. So moving further south now to Lewis and Clark Drive. Today, this intersection is listed as a priority and potential safety improvement intersection and has significant operational concerns. And we have two alternatives for this intersection. I think we have 3 total more to go. So the first one here is the modified signal and lane configuration. What this does is it adds a second signalized left turn lane on the eastbound approach. And the benefits to this improvement include reduced delay and conflict points and added pedestrian facilities, those of which would be signalized and provide multi-stage crossings for these channelized right turn lanes. The challenges for this include minor right-of-way acquisition, again, just for the added turn lane. The R-cut alternative converts the intersection to direct all those minor approach vehicles to turn right. In this case, we don't actually have that fourth leg here. And so the R-cut assumes that the future development would be occurring to the east. Actually, I think we meant to show an R-cut, one that does not assume this fourth leg. But the benefits, regardless, to the R-cut here are the reduced delay, added pedestrian signal, and then the reduction of angle crashes. The challenge is that it's more costly, and some right-of-way would need to be acquired, and some minor out-of-direction vehicle or travel is needed for vehicles. And lastly, we have the intersection of US 29 at Airport Road. And today this intersection has significant operational concerns as well as safety concerns. It's also the most dense, the furthest south intersection in our study area, getting closer to the city of Charlottesville. And we have one alternative for this intersection. And so this adds a third receiving lane northbound and ends at the new driveway on US 29 across from the northern Airport Acres Road approach. So if I can get my screen all the way up here. Separate right turn lane is also added in the southbound direction instead of the shared through right that is there today, and pedestrian signals are added as well. The benefits to this improvement are the pedestrian facilities, reduced delay, and no out of direction travel being needed. There is minor right-of-way acquisition needed for the extension of this receiving lane, as well as the additional southbound right turn lane. So as I said, this is a lot of content to run through in a short period of time. However, we do have opportunities for you to take more time to look over, process, and gather your thoughts and share your feedback on these ideas with us that we've developed. I'll pass it over to Andy to share more now.
Thanks. So yeah, we have these preliminary alternatives, but what are the next steps? And the next one, as Kylie mentioned, is to get your feedback. We would love to hear from you about these. We presented a few different alternatives for each of these intersections. So we'd love to get your feedback via the MetroQuest survey here, and we'll have Side drop the link to this survey in the chat. This link will also be on the VDOT website in the coming days. So if you'd like to stay up to date on the study, we'd encourage you to go to that VDOT website there for the study. That project website will have this presentation, have a recording of this presentation. It also have all the documents we've developed so far, including the previous public meeting information, the reports, the concepts, so you can have full blown up PDFs of each of these concepts to take a look at in your own leisure. But really, we'd love to get your feedback via that MetroQuest survey, and it opens up in just a few minutes, opens up at 8 p.m. Eastern. So feel free to answer that, and you can provide your feedback on any particular alternative that you are interested in. So in terms of schedule, we're in mid-May now. That survey is going to be open for the next 2 weeks, and it'll close towards the end of May, early June. And after we get your feedback, we're going to incorporate that, adjust the alternatives as necessary, and then develop a final report to document all of our findings and the feedback that we received. So ultimately, we'll be able to take these concepts and provide them to the counties and VDOT, and they can move these concepts forward if they want to, or if they find the funding for them in the future. So after the study, like I mentioned, none of these projects are funded or scheduled to be implemented yet. They're all still being evaluated more. So to move these projects forward, they really need to secure that funding, and where that funding comes from depends on how the counties or VDOT prioritizes each of these individual alternatives. So some of those could be funded through private development, or like I mentioned earlier, the Smart Scale program through VDOT. It's a biannual, every 2 years. The counties and other agencies can submit projects that they're looking for funding to VDOT. They get ranked against projects across the state based on their benefits and their costs. And a handful of projects are selected in each district to move forward. And that full cycle of when the project's submitted and when it's ultimately constructed is an 8 to 10 year timeline ultimately, from when it starts to when it ends. So none of these, except for maybe some of the low cost improvements, are coming immediately. The construction timeline is going to vary for each of these based on how that funding goes along. But as I mentioned, these are all still preliminary. A lot of more work needs to go into them. More detailed design needs to occur. Some more analysis in terms of the environmental impacts of them, as well as additional community engagement needs to happen for some of these alternatives prior to them being implemented. So again, at the early stages with all of these. So now we'll open it up to the question and answer session. We can start with any questions that came in through the Q&A, and then if anyone wasn't able to use that, we are happy to answer questions via live audio as well.
There was one question in the Q&A. It was from Barb, and Charles Proctor answered it, but I'll read the question. And Barb, if you still have a question, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you and we can talk with you now, or post in the chat if you still have a question. So the question is, will there be a roundabout at Pretty Creek Road and then go up to Route 29 to make a right onto 29 a U-turn?
I can go back to the slides that had shared that as well.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm gonna Barb.
Yeah, that was related to the bow tie, I think. And the way the bow tie works, and that's what I was trying to say. It's basically we're relocating all the left-hand turns at the 29 intersection. And to make the left-hand turn, you would have to make a right onto Matthew Mills or Cedar Grove Road, and then make the U-turn at the roundabout, and then go back through the intersection to complete the left-hand turn. If you're on the side streets and you're making the left-hand turn, you would go through the intersection to the roundabout, U-turn, and then come back to the intersection and make the right. Hopefully that is clear to you, Barb.
Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Okay. I'm talking about if I'm going west on Matthew Mill Road. First of all, I'm coming out of Pretty Creek Road. Is there going to be a roundabout right there at Pretty Creek and Matthew Mill?
If we're building this solution, which is the bow tie solution, it would require a roundabout on both sides of this main intersection at 29. So yes, there would be one there.
So you go to the roundabout, you go to Route 29, make a right-hand turn, you go down to where we're making our U-turn, and then going south on 29.
No, what you would do is, instead of making that right-hand turn at Matthew Mills, you would go straight across to Cedar Grove, go to the other roundabout and make a
Oh my
U-turn
gosh,
and come back and then make the right-hand turn.
that's
I mean,
ridiculous.
you could make the right turn on 29, go north to the entrance to the shopping center and make a U-turn and come back. That's an alternative way to do it. What this solution tries to do is eliminate the number of movements at the main intersection and increase the efficiency of the intersection.
Are the people from Frays Mill Road going to have to do about the same thing then? Whenever they make their right and turn onto 29?
Well, that was what was proposed originally in the study. For this one, I mean, we're trying to get feedback from the public on which one of the alternatives they would like us to move forward with. And that's what we're here to do, to present these and get feedback.
Okay, in 2024, supposedly they're supposed to do the improvements on Matthew Mill Road. Is that going to start with all this then in 2024? Or what are they going to do on Matthew Mill Road in 2024?
I don't think there's anything planned for Matthew Mill Road. The plans are for the connector road from 670, which is Pretty Creek Road, over to the 29. And then they're going to be making the improvements out on 29, just south of Matthew Mills Road.
Okay.
That's a separate project that's already funded and under design.
Okay, how do I find out about that project?
You can go to the website, and they have a project website which has that information on it. I don't have that information right now, but let me see if I can pull it up. It's here. Let's see it here. They may not have posted it. Yeah, here it is, 670 connector. Here, I'll post the link in the chat
Okay,
and you can get the information on that project.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
For me,
Sorry, I was muted. There are no other questions at this point.
Yeah, so we can open it up, I guess, to the yeah, like Barb, if you have any additional questions, a couple of other folks on the line as well. If you want to raise your hand, we can also take them live as well.
I'm done.
Well, if there are no more questions, but yeah, we'll be happy to answer any questions. If you come up with one after the meeting's over, we can certainly answer that. You can, if you kind of go to the last slide. Right now we have Chuck's contact information, but he can forward any questions to us or the appropriate person. So appreciate you all taking the time to come out tonight. You can stay up to date on the project via the project website there, and it's also in the chat. And the survey just went live 1 minute ago, so feel free to provide your feedback there. Again, appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. And if you're watching this recording, the survey will be open 2 weeks from today, March 19th. So open up to any other closing thoughts, Chuck, Lucinda?
No, thanks for everybody for participating. And like Andy said, if you would, don't mind taking the survey and give us your feedback on all these projects. We will be posting this stuff to the website in the next few days, so that'll all be available for you to review. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, and I will be happy to get you a response to your questions. Or if you want to call me, my number's there. You can call me also. Thank you again for participating in this webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to end the webinar now.